quite unbelievably, Leon Edwards knocked Kamaru Usman out cold in their welterweight world title fight at UFC 278 a couple of weeks ago, and Leon has since confirmed that he fully believes the former champion is deserving of an instant rematch, confirming what most of MMA observers had previously thought would go down. Today we're discussing Leon's words surrounding a potential Usman trilogy fight, plus other little bits and pieces surrounding the pair. Stay tuned. Let's get straight into it then. What did Edwards have to say? Well, having just won the welterweight world title, Leon Edwards is refusing to back out of a Thursday fight with one of the greatest UFC welterweight champs of all time, Kamaru Usman. Shortly after the famous knockout win, attention quickly turned to the third fight between the pair, with the score finally poised at 1 win apiece, and Edwards has no problem granting Usman an immediate rematch, after unleashing what many of the sport's finest have claimed is the greatest head kick KO of all time, given how the fight had unfolded up to that point. Rocky said, "I think Usman is deserving of the trilogy. This is of course fantastic news for fans of the sport, and Edwards should be commended for his willingness to fight Usman for a third time." He went on to say, "I would love to have it back in the UK Wembley, would be good. The O2 would be good in London. I would love to give him the rematch, run it back, and let's settle the score." Of course, there is no official word from the UFC as of yet, but it is thought Dana White would be willing to book the trilogy. Edwards would be within his rights as champion to give the fight to whoever the UFC deems next in line. But looking in his rear view, he might have realized that man is probably going to be Khamzat Chimaev. He might view Usman as an easier fight. What do you think? What else did Leon have to say then? Stay tuned to find out. Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal, the pair came to blows after UFC London back in 2019 after Edwards had goaded Masvidal during a backstage interview. Gamebred then cut the interview short and approached Leon to confront him about his remarks. Sparks quickly flew, with Masvidal landing a few solid shots on Edwards, telling reporters shortly after that he, quote, had to give him the three-piece with soda and then just glide out of there, you know? The UFC tried to book a fight between the two shortly after, but it didn't materialize. However, Edwards hasn't forgotten the altercation. Describing the Miami man as unfinished business, Leon went on to say, "Masvidal is on my list, but I think right now Jorge is on a 2-3 fight losing streak. Masvidal is some way off title contention at the moment, as he currently occupies 9th in the rankings," which Edwards also recognized by saying, quote, "He needs to go out there and get some wins and make the fights make sense. That's a fight I can think would be massive for the UFC, and to get my revenge on him, I cannot wait. This one sells itself considering the history between the pair, but Jorge definitely needs to get back on track first. Who do you guys have winning if this one eventually gets booked?" Next up, Dana White has given his thoughts on accusations of Edwards cheating. Last week, MMA's biggest motormouth, Chael Sonnen, actually claimed that Leon Edwards had cheated his way to victory. The former middleweight and light heavyweight challenger had claimed that Edwards had grabbed the fence on multiple occasions throughout the fight before delivering the head kick KO. However, Dana White has defended his newly crowned welterweight champ, calling any claims of Leon cheating, quote, "silly, ridiculous, and absolutely unfair." Sonnen had suggested Edwards was grabbing the fence to avoid one of Usman's biggest weapons, the takedown, but White has a different take on the evening's proceedings. He said, quote, "He became champion with a head kick. He didn't win by grabbing the fence. He got absolutely dominated in that whole fight except for that couple of minutes in the first round." The boss then directly referenced Sonnen by saying the former title challenger was being, quote, "completely unfair." He went on to shout out Edwards for the heart he had shown, saying he dug down and landed literally the perfect head kick with like a minute left in the fight, before going on to say, "So I would say that's silly, ridiculous, and absolutely unfair to say about Leon." Of course, Sonnen is one of the most outspoken personalities in the whole of the MMA, and won't particularly care that White hasn't seen it his way. What do you make of Dana's comments? Edwards' coach has been speaking out other potential title shot candidates now. Stay tuned. Of course, it is widely accepted that Leon will dance with Kamaru Usman for a third time right away, but his coach Dave Lovell has been discussing some different options for his charge this week. Leon himself has told Edwards that he, quote, "is deserving of an instant rematch considering what he had done in the division and his long winning streak before the brutal UFC 278 knockout." But he also mentioned a couple of other names such as Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, and Lovell himself has suggested that Khamzat would be in the driving seat for a shot at the title with a win over Nate Nate. He said, quote, "If he does beat Nate and manages to beat Nate in bad fashion and retire him, I think somehow they'll be looking to slip him in somewhere down the line. This has widely been reported to be the case anyway, so Lovell's words will come as no surprise, but he did have a message for another potential title challenger. Addressing the number 2 ranked fighter in the division directly, he said, quote, "Colby, you little redneck, you can stay furthermore." He went on to say, "It's Leon's time to talk. It's his time to let these so-called big mouths," Colby called him what? Didn't even call him by his name. What was he calling him, Leon Scott? Well, I've got news for him now. It's not Leon Scott. Call him Sir Leon Scott from this day on. What do you guys think? We're discussing Joe Rogan's thoughts on that head kick now. Stick around. Of course, Joe Rogan is better placed than most to talk about knockouts considering how long he's called fights for his own martial arts experience. And discussing Edwards' showstopper on his Joe Rogan Experience podcast this week, the stand-up comedian has described the huge kick as effing magic. Rogan, along with Daniel Cormier, had been discussing Edwards' obituary in the lead-up to the knockout and literally thought the fight was over, fully expecting Usman to get his hand raised over via a points decision. Of course, it didn't play out that way, with Rocky shocking the world on a recent episode of his podcast. Rogan said, "The head kick was so perfect. It's so textbook," before going on to describe the newly crowned champion as so technical. Rogan then showed Edwards more love by dishing out adjectives like smooth and efficient before saying, "It wasn't shocking that he could do that. It was shocking in the context of his performance up until that moment." Going on to explain how he set the head kick up, Rogan was effusive in his praise of Englishman, going on DC's words by claiming, "It's the greatest come from behind head kick knockout ever." Edwards is the perfect case study of why we should never assume a fight is over, as this level anything can happen. What do you think of Rogan's words? And finally, Leon has explained what went down in the earlier rounds. As we all saw, Leon Edwards was completely dominated by former champion Kamaru Usman in the 4 rounds before his head kick KO shook the world of mixed martial arts. And the English brawler has recently discussed just what was going on, suggesting his body shut down. Many people believe that it's simply due to Usman being the better and more well-rounded fighter, but Edward has a different take, explaining the anomaly as a weird feeling. The new champ said, quote, "It wasn't cardio, it was like my body just wasn't reacting. In my head, I could think what I wanted to do, but my body just wasn't doing it." We could possibly chalk it up to stage fright, but Edwards went on to delve deeper on the MMA Hour a couple of days after the fight, saying that he had never looked like that in any of his previous 10 fights, revealing that he was questioning himself as to what was going on during the fight. Edwards then said, quote, "The first round I felt normal. Then after that, my body just kind of shut down on me." Who you got in the rematch? As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to tune in again next time when we will have some more fun reveals for you. And why not do us a big favor by liking and sharing today's video whilst also subscribing to this channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.